My guest today is Dion Gooderham, Director of Legal Services at Uniting Church in Australia. For over 15 years, Dion held very senior roles within the Australian banking and insurance industry, and now heads up the Legal Services Division at the Uniting Church in Australia for the Synod of Victoria and Tasmania. I'm really excited to speak with Dion today about the challenges facing the not-for-profit sector, and also to hear his insights into how his legal team has been adapting to the pandemic, and also to discuss future opportunities for the legal industry. Thank you for joining me, Dion.
Good to be here.
The Uniting Church in Australia, through its many charitable and community service arms, is actually one of the largest non-government providers of community services in Australia. Given all of this, the COVID-19 pandemic must have kept the legal team incredibly busy. What are the key issues that you've been facing?
Thanks, Sasha. The COVID era has really just sort of added to the workload for the team. We've got 12 in our team based in Melbourne here, 10 of them legally qualified and a couple of paralegal staff. So it's a bit like a mini law firm in a way. They operate in practice groups, property trusts, dispute resolution and commercial. And so in addition to all of the business as usual work of running a legal operation of a large organisation, the COVID-19 regulations and the directions have really added to that a lot. So we've been working pretty much every day on some COVID-related issue. And I think a lot of people would be surprised at the scale of the organisation. Really, people assume that the Uniting Church is made up of churches and congregations and religious faith-based bodies, which it obviously is, but it's also very much in the not-for-profit charitable sector with a number of very large institutions, and in almost every service sector you can think of: aged care, health, disability, housing, child and youth services, alcohol rehab, you name it, we're in it. And that's very interesting and diverse, and also very much linked in with government as well, because a lot of those services are partially government funded. It's quite a diverse practice area. It's probably more complicated than anything I've ever done, even in some of the more complex esoteric financial services stuff. This is actually more challenging in some ways. So it's keeping us all very busy.
The next 12 months will be a challenge for the not-for-profit sector. And in your area, government funding, bequests and charitable donations will, they might be limited whilst demand for services might increase. What are you concerned about, and are there any opportunities, I guess, to come out of this?
This crisis has been going for, let's say, 3 months. I think it's still unfolding, to be honest. I mean, there's a lot of alarm out there. A lot of people have really suffered quite badly. I think the recovery is going to be quite slow and difficult, and I think that will definitely, as you say, increase demand for charitable services, not-for-profit services, etc. And funding, I think, will always be a problem. We're fortunate in one sense that government funding, I think, is probably longer tail and more reliable than, say, private sector funding. So a large amount of our funding base is probably going to remain in place, but then we have to make up the difference with charitable bequests and donations and all of that. That is definitely going to be a challenge. We've got a bit smarter in recent times at running online charitable fundraising campaigns, doing much more outbound focus on getting interest in bequests and donations and the like. And that's been working pretty well. But at the moment, I think the whole team is just keeping calm and carrying on. We're very much linked in with the front line of all of the service providers within the Uniting and Uniting Church networks, and they're out doing the good work out in the community, and we very much feel sort of that we're backing them up and supporting their efforts. I think most of the team is feeling pretty positive about our role, so we certainly don't feel as if we're sitting in the back office doing drudgy work. We're actually in the trenches with the Uniting and Uniting Church teams doing the hard stuff. But it's not without its challenges. I think everyone's had an economic impact. We're no exception. I think we're all having to readjust and make modifications based on that. But so far, I think looking at the longer term, it'll just be continuing to recover, hopefully.
Digital transformation has been thrust upon the legal industry, and I can tell that you're already doing this interview from the International Space Station, Dion. How have you and the team adapted and managed to maintain your culture and your productivity?
Well, I'm calling you from the Uniting Church satellite, which is currently hovering over Northern Territory. We've got about 650 congregations in Victoria and Tasmania, and most of them, as you'd expect, probably on the north side of the demographic age scale. You wouldn't expect them necessarily to be technologically advanced, but they've adapted to live streaming services and video conferencing all of their council meetings and everything really, really well. And it's quite remarkable how quickly they've mobilized, and in some funny ways it's actually enhanced their ability to provide services to their own congregation. So if you've got, for example, someone who's a member of a congregation who's incapacitated, who's stuck at home and who couldn't get to church anyway, now live streaming of services has actually made that quite possible. So it's actually in some ways improved the ability to deliver services.
What sort of systems and ways of working have you and your legal team had to adapt to, Dion?
Especially in the COVID period, we've really moved to the video conferencing format as the default much more rapidly, but probably like everyone else has. And I think we've just got better at using existing systems. For example, the Lorcadia platform we've been using for some time now, especially for all of our procurement of legal services, and that has really become much more embedded because it's just a much more efficient way of processing instructions and workflows and invoices and the like. We're also been moving, for example, we're a statutory property trust, like most faith-based organisations have. We still have a company seal or a trust seal, which is unusual in the modern world. So we spent quite a bit of time figuring out how to execute documents under seal in a digital format. So back in, even 3 months ago, we would have a sealing meeting. The trustees would turn up and affix the seal to the document and then get it out. It was quite a ceremony every week. Now that's all digital, so people aren't turning up to the office. The seal is affixed digitally, signatures are affixed using some snazzy software, and surprisingly enough, everyone likes it. It's actually been a really quite a seamless change from quite an old-fashioned way of doing things into a reasonably sophisticated way of doing things.
Looking to the future, what are the challenges and opportunities for the legal industry?
I think it's inevitable that we'll be moving much more towards automation, much more towards digitisation of records. The cloud is here to stay. All of that's happening. Most law firms have actually done a pretty good job in changing their operating models, accommodating client requests, moving to digital platforms, etc. They've actually done a pretty good job, and adapted quite well. The one issue I think that I'm still struggling with how it's going to evolve is fee models. Whilst I've never been a fan of hourly rates, and I still think they're not the most productive and efficient way of delivering legal services, the reality is that it's a very hard topic to wean internal and external lawyers off. And so I've sort of come to the realisation grudgingly that it's probably here for a while longer, and to learn to live with it. We try as hard as possible to encourage firms not to apply hourly rates to their fee estimates, to try to have more project-based and global estimates on fees. Some of them do a good job, and some of them are still very much stuck on hourly rates. So that's probably my one grievance about what firms are doing at the moment. I think there's probably still a reticence to have, and it may be sort of part of the professional culture, is a reticence to have quite transparent discussions about fees and estimates, and try to anticipate early when there might be changes or variations coming down the track. And I don't think that's a technology issue so much as more just being much more transparent about that.
And thank you so much for your time today. It's been fantastic talking with you.
Thank you, Sasha.